talk about their prompt tuning way of doing annotation. I think a lot of people enjoyed it, so we thought we'll continue with this thing trend. So today we have GX. GX is a member of the AI innovation team, and he basically leads the preference tuning work there. Recently, he submitted a paper with a bunch of other folks, and he will introduce, that looked into creating a method that very much to our true spirit does not require any human annotation data, which is a big deal. If you think about how preference tuning has actually worked in the industry, it's a costly affair. And actually, as he will show, that he can do preference tuning at the state-of-the-art level while requiring only open source model. It's a pretty interesting method. He will also walk you through how to, in fact, use it in practice on a notebook. And the best part is that this is in the pipeline on the roadmap to appear in one of the subsequent RHEL AI releases. Okay, with that background, I think I'll hand it over to GX, who will probably spend a couple of minutes introducing himself and then kick off the talk.
Oh, thank you so much for the introduction, Akash, and hello, everyone. My name is GX. I'm working in the AI innovation team and Shock Lab team, focusing on preference training. And today I want to give a talk about how do we actually scale preference training, preference alignment using open source models to overcome the human data bottlenecks to obtain high quality data to perform preference training. And so let me try to also, people feel free to stop me or pause me if you have questions in my talk. Let me start to share my screen. All right. So can people see my full screen? Is this a full screen or is this like a demo screen that you see?
I think you want to switch it
to the demo. Yeah.
Okay. Let me redo the sharing. Sorry about this. Window and oops. All right. Can people see the full screen right now?
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. So this work has been done in collaboration with our wonderful team members, Kai and Shiv and Hao and our chief, Akash. So a round of thanks for all of you for helping me to make this work possible. And now without further ado, let's get started. In the beginning, let's talk about what is preference training. And this is a concept that has been around for a while. Prior research starting from 2019, 2020, have started to try this method to incorporate human feedback data into large language model training. And they have shown that it gives a pretty significant improvement over only doing SFT training, instruction tuning on various held out evaluation set and benchmarks. And this practice of collecting human data and then optimize on a large language model towards improved human preference. And this practice typically involves using reinforcement learning techniques is referred to as preference training. So as we talked just now, preference training often adopts reinforcement learning, and there are kind of two lines of approaches of using reinforcement learning. One is called online reinforcement learning, that with common methods like reinforce and PPO, and later research actually shows that online reinforcement learning works well, but it also suffers from issues like instability in training and also very complex training pipelines So later research actually introduces offline methods to perform preference, which also gives competitive performances. Most notably, those methods include DPO and experience, such as RDPO and SynPO. So all those online training, offline training that incorporates human feedback and use that to align a language model to be more human preferred. This is generally referred to as preference fine-tuning. Do people have any questions? Let me see the comments. All right, if no, then let's move on. So why do we need preference tuning? So after introducing what is preference tuning, why do we need it? Why is this going to help us get a better large language model? And the one very important motivation is that people start to realize that there is actually a mismatch between how we previously train language model using next token prediction objectives, such as pre-training and supervised fine-tuning, where we have like the good response and the objective of the model is to predict what is the best, what is the goal token that it should learn to generate. However, this is a mismatch between like human perception of how a language model works sometimes, like whether the model response is clear, whether it has a good style, whether it's succinct, whether it's straightforward, that is very easy for users to understand and to interact with. And because of this mismatch, people start to experiment with the methods of introducing how human judgment applies to whether a response is good or not into the training process and make it actually an objective. And of course, preference training really gains momentum after it shows a lot of empirical results. In 2020, OpenAI releases a paper that basically uses reinforcement learning from human feedback on summarization task, and they trained with human feedback using proximal policy optimization (PPO) algorithm, and they show significant improvement over SFT performance baseline. And this result is illustrated on the chart on the right, where the dotted line you can see here is the reference summaries, which is the golden human written response, supposedly. And the blue lines here is the pre-trained models. The green line here is supervised, is the SFT model. And the orange line is the ones that has been trained with the preference training using human feedback. And we can see that the human preferred RLHF aligned model actually achieved 70% preferred over gold human written response. Not even to mention the supervised learning only achieves about 40%, and pre-trained model only achieves something on the 30-something percent. And this improvement, this significant boost, is occurring across model sizes on the data set they are testing, which is data set based on, I think, Reddit conversations. It's called TLDR. It's a pretty popular data set. And then there is ChatGPT, which came out in late 2022. And ChatGPT is actually based on an OpenAI paper also released in 2022 that's called Training Language Models to Follow Instructions with Human Feedback. And the key findings is the paper is that it kind of generalizes the technique across a lot of domains, not just summarization task. They have a huge held-out set, and then they find significant improvements in human preference levels after performing RLHF training. And the result is shown in the chart on the right. And as you can see, like from across a lot of model sizes, from 1.3 billion parameter to 175 billion parameter, the model that's being trained with RLHF, which in the chart is denoted by PPO or PPO PTX, this is a variant of the PPO algorithm, which includes pre-training loss into the objective. But it's not very It may not be very relevant to our current topic, so you can just think of it as a PPO algorithm that is using human feedback to align model. And you can see that those human preference aligned models perform significantly higher than other raw GPT-3, a pre-trained based GPT-3 model and the SFT model. And the authors also found strong generalization of preference training to domains like code and foreign language, even without actually training much on those domains. So this is a very surprising result. But there is also some caveat to RLHF training. It is not perfect. It doesn't solve all the problems, and it actually leads to performance regression on some domains, on some academic benchmarks. Being reported here is like squad, drop, HALA swag, and WMT translation task. But this is not too big a concern, because when users interact with a language model, what they care about is whether the language model is actually being useful, is actually being helpful to the task that's for the request the user throws. And the academic benchmark, which argued by the paper, do not fully reflect the real-world LLM usage and the user perception of how good the model is, which is, for us, what really matters the most. Let me pause the slide for a little bit and see if there are questions. All right. I don't see any questions right now. So let's go on.
We're muted. We're muted. No, can we unmute it because Mo has a question?
And we are unmuted.
Yeah, we are unmuted.
No,
All right.
No worries.
Okay. Sorry, GX. I had a quick question. How did they assess the real world LLM usage? Was it just manual?
So for example, for the ChatGPT paper, they had a held out set, which for their description is going to be reflective of how real users interact with the OpenAI ChatGPT models, GPT series models, and they use humans to. So for all the win rates, it is actually performed by human annotation. Evaluations done by humans to say, oh, this is a blind test. Which one is better?
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go on. So now we have introduced preference training and why preference training matters. Then there are also roadblocks for open source to perform preference training effectively and efficiently. And the main roadblock is the data. Reinforcement learning from human feedback will only be as good as your value function in the reinforcement learning process. And this value function for learning from human preference is how the value function approximates actual human preference. And for offline reinforcement learning, the value function or the reward is implicit in the preference data set. And the quality of your preference data set will determine the outcome of the learning. However, human data from like high quality human data, especially from domain expert, is very expensive to obtain. And filtering and quality control is also a difficult task for the ones that are released, especially for research purpose. Prior to, say, 2024, all the data sets that are open source from humans, they are typically very noisy. And it's very difficult to train a state-of-the-art model using those, even though they're human data set, but they are too noisy to produce a very good model. And even for the ones, the human data set that are released, most of them are not open source with permissible license, with exceptions of help steer. NVIDIA in 2024, they are being very nice and they release a few high quality human data sets, human annotated data sets. I call it help steer and help steer 2 series. I have the citation here if people are interested to try. But with those very few exceptions, most data sets that are human annotated, they are kept in-house and they're not released. Even if they're released, they don't have a good license for people to use. And on top of that, even if you have the money and the resource, there is a news from Wall Street Journal in 2023 that says OpenAI's ChatGPT takes a very heavy toll on human workers who are traumatized by violent and sexual abuse content when performing data screening annotation. This is because during the when we're collecting when we're collecting human feedback, the domain of the scope of the conversation is very broad, and unavoidably it will cover some risky or some violent content, and this will need human moderators to judge which one is good and which one is bad. And the process of screening this actually could be very traumatizing. So like this part, we're introducing why it is difficult to obtain human data, and is currently presenting itself as a huge bottleneck for open source to train state-of-the-art preference aligned model. So because of this bottleneck, people have quickly pivoted to using AI feedback to replace human feedback. And like research has done right after, a lot of research has come out right after the release of the ChatGPT and ChatGPT paper. Like one most notable ones is constitutional AI, and why people are starting to use this. One, AI feedback is just more scalable. It not only saves on cost, there is also the effort that's being saved. The time of iteration that's taken to collect human data is also very long. So AI feedback is just way more scalable. And also AI supervision sometimes could just be superior to humans, especially when your annotator is not a domain expert in the things that they are supposed to be annotating. For example, in coding, in chess, in Go, in all those domains, AI may be a better judge of what is good response and what is a bad response. And very known work is called constitutional AI from Anthropic. And what they're proposed, this work is also released in late 2022, and they use a set of principles to instruct a judge model, is typically a very large model, to decide what is a good and what is a bad response. And they encode this set of principles to be what they call a constitution, hence the name constitutional AI. And this is what we generally classify as generative reward, because we are prompting a large language model, some large language model, to generate like a critique, a judgment of a response, whether it is good or bad. And however, like this kind of approach often rely on powerful proprietary models. You need to have a very capable model from the beginning, so that you can use its judgment as a reliable source of preference. And typically, even you are using very large model, it does not perform as well as trained classifiers, as evidence on reward benchmarks. So like what we are going to introduce, our work is an extension of the RLAIF line of research, which is reinforcement learning from AI feedback, that we seek to obtain preference data without using human annotation and without using a large, more powerful teacher large language model, and not training an explicit reward model. And hopefully we can also have fine-grained control over what this AI supervision signal gives. Like we need to be able to tell the AI what is the definition of safety for us, what is the definition of good for us, what is the definition of clarity for us. And then we want to be able to align a SFT model to the state-of-the-art performance. So this will be the goal of our work. Yeah. So so this slide will start to introduce the exact method that we propose to perform preference data annotation. And our approach is using density ratio between two models. And this approach isn't unique, and we are not the first one to adopt a method like this. There has been previous work that uses a similar like reward function formulation, and we're going to introduce this. So the prior work uses something called implicit DPO reward as an annotator, as a human preference approximate annotator. And how this works is that it takes a DPO, a model that has been through DPO training, which in this case is pi theta, and it also takes the model before DPO training, which in this case is which in this formulation is called pi ref, and then it takes the density ratio between the DPO model and the pre-DPO model, and it applies a log on the ratio. And why people think this formulation will work, and it actually does perform some signal for human preference, is that when people are performing DPO training, DPO is a form of, is an algorithm to align model towards human preference. When people are using DPO objective to align an SFT model towards human preference, the theory is that it also learns an implicit reward function that approximates the ground truth reward from the training set. So while you are aligning a model to be, to act in human preferred ways, at the same time, that model itself contrasted with the reference model, which is its starting point, in itself already constitutes a reward function. This is what the theory says. And there are several advantages of this kind of method. First, there are a lot of open source DPO models that are being released on Hugging Face. And this method is training free. You can simply take two models and take their density ratio. There's no training involved in obtaining a reward function. And since there is no training, there is also no data required. So you don't need to collect actual human data to perform, to use this reward function to annotate data. Yeah, however, there are also clear disadvantages of this this class of method. Firstly, is that it doesn't really perform as well as either classifier-based or generated reward functions. So lower reward performance, and also it's reported to have high variance depending on the model choices. So basically, what it means is if you choose a non-ideal set of two models, a DPO model and a non-DPO model, if you did not make a good selection, this formulation will work very poorly, and people do not know why this is the case. And to give a better illustration of the low performance, I actually have a link to a popular benchmark to measure reward performance. Let me click open it. This is a screenshot, but I want to show people the flow chart. Okay, I think I'm actually only screen sharing my. I think I'm only screen sharing this slide. So let me stop presenting and actually share the reward bench. So this is a popular benchmark people use to evaluate models. And sequence classifier means people train a reward function, train a reward model to predict to give a scalar score to the response. And this is a sequence classifiers. Generative reward is a large language model that generates a token about what is good, what is bad. And DPO is the implicit DPO reward that we were talking about just now. So overall, if you look at the benchmark, the top is occupied by sequence classifier and some generated reward. And the density ratio based reward really ranks on the lower end of the benchmark in comparison to other methods. I think this point is clear now. Let me go back to screen sharing. All right, there you go. Right, so our research will focus on those two disadvantages. So our first question is, why does like DPO, implicit DPO reward, since it's actually trained on the objective, why does it have a high variance on the model choices? So we actually did a ablation study on DPO checkpoint to see if we can actually observe the variance in performance ourselves. So we made the experiment setting to be iterative DPO training, where rather than just training for one time from a from an SMT model towards DPO model iteration 1, we actually perform DPO training iteratively. What it means is that after training on the first iteration, then we make the DPO first iteration the starting point for the next iteration of training. And then we train it for the iteration first, iteration 2, and iteration 3. And in this experiment, we will ensure that for each iteration of training, the model is actually learning in the process. And this is evidenced by the number annotated below. Those are arena hard score for each checkpoint. And arena hard is a benchmark for model performance generally. So we can see the model is actually improving. So the training is successful. So according to the theory, the implicit DPO theory that we presented in this slide, the correct combination that we would expect the density ratio would work very well is highlighted in the red blocks. According to the theory, those should be the best, the optimal reward function that we can obtain through DPO training. In this case, it should be 75, 60. And the numbers that are being reported in the plot is the reward accuracy. So the reward actually is the higher the better. This means 75% accuracy and 78% accuracy on the reward benchmark. And we can see that it actually doesn't really have very good consistent accuracy, which is what people previously are also reporting high variance from DPO checkpoints. And in this case, we also observe high variance from 72 to 67 to 65. And we wonder, why? Why is this the case? That if the DPO objective is training to learn an implicit reward function, why is this reward function performing so poorly, especially if you compare to other choices of models? And so this question actually motivates us to take a different perspective on what density ratio formulation is actually doing. So after some thought, we propose the strong over weak hypothesis, where inspired by this chart, we find that if we have two models that have very large gap in performance, for example, if we choose the denominator model as a base model or SFP model, which are both very weak in performance, and then we choose some stronger models like DPO iteration 3, DPO iteration 2, DPO iteration 1, and contrast with a strong model, we find the performance to be generally very stable and better, much better than the supposedly optimal implicit DPO reward. So based on this observation, we propose a strong over weak hypothesis, where we think density ratio, it is an approximate of human preference because it is capturing the difference between how a well-aligned model sees a response and an underaligned model sees the response, and it uses the difference as a preference signal. And in order for this signal to be less noisy and more explicit, increasing the preference gap between the strong model and weak model should improve the accuracy of the density ratio reward. And this is how we hypothesize. And we also after some experimentation, we also believe that this finding is much more generalizable than the DPO class of models. And it should also apply to models preference aligned using various objectives, including just supervised fine-tuning or PPO, KTO, ROHF, ORPO, SymPO, IPO, SLIC, HF, etc. So in order to test this hypothesis. So we actually we designed an experiment using 221 unique model pairs, and those model pairs includes models trained using those various objectives, and also models from 2 different model families, like common open source model families, Mistral 7B model and Llama 8B model. And then we plot the x-axis as the model alignment gap, which is the difference in how 2 models are aligned, basically the gap between the strong model and the weak model, and also reward bench score, which is the reward accuracy, how well the density ratio reward performs on the reward bench benchmark. And this experiment clearly reveals a correlation between the alignment gap and density ratio, where you see when the alignment gap is very small or negative, the reward bench score similar is very low, and when the alignment gap is very high in the 10 and 15, then we can see the model, the reward function that's being constructed by the 2 models is very stably on the high 70s. And this is holds for both Mistral and Llama families. And those models, they are not only DPU and SFT, but also including models trained with those various objectives. So why this observation is important? Because it shows why sometimes the DPO, the supposedly implicit DPO objective gives high variance when picking models, when picking different model combinations. And this hypothesis actually helped guide us to, when we are choosing the model pairs to construct the reward function, actually help guide us to say we should actually choose a weaker denominator model so that there is a large enough gap, and then it will ensure less noisy reward signal and more robust performance. Is there any questions? Yeah,
Not
maybe
really a question, but I just wanted to make a few comments, because I think like we might be at a point where this has gone down the rabbit hole so far that so deep that people are a little bit lost. So just to bring everybody back to the surface, I think the long story short here is human feedback data is very helpful to make your models work really well. Human data, or getting that data, is very, very expensive. To give you some idea of how expensive it is, it can cost you somewhere between $15 to $50 for a single sample. Right. So as GX said, it became very quickly a thing that only OpenAI could do, or bigger labs could do, and then folks at Anthropic and other labs started creating annotation methods that used other bigger models. Right? And that's what RLAIF was. And that sort of bootstrapped the whole field of research, where people started looking into how can we scale this, right? Because the early results from the constitutional AI work, etc., were not as good as what you could get if you were actually buying this data off of Scale or Turing. All right, so then at some point we started looking into this issue, because what we had seen is data sets started appearing on Hugging Face under very permissible licensing, until you realize that the data that they were putting out there was actually generated using GPT-4 or other bigger models that violated their term of use. So you could not use it to train a model and put it out there under commercial license. So we started thinking about how to solve this problem, and the method that GX is describing so far actually builds on some very simple principles. It basically says, take your model, give it some prompts, and generate a bunch of responses from it. Now, there's a fancy way of doing annotation using ratios of densities of 2 models. And what he's describing here is, hey guys, we found if you take a very strong model, or actually replace very with a relatively strong model compared to something that is relatively weak on that particular benchmark, in this case, ArenaHard, then we found empirically, and also the theory that you can read in the paper, that works as an amazing mechanism for labeling your data, the data that you generated from your own model. And then through further experimentation, when we go from here, you will see is when we took that annotated data and trained our model with PPO, DPO, etc., we actually saw amazing performance improvement, reaching state of the art. And when I say state of the art, I mean compared to using reward functions that use proprietary data or data generated by OpenAI and other folks. Okay, I'm gonna give it back to GX. And GX, one more thing, in the interest of time, let's get to the actual results.
Okay. Yeah, so thanks for the reminder, Akash. So yeah, so like after we make this observation, we also find that we can actually make density ratio, we can actually provide instruction to the density ratio so that it knows what we as AI researchers define as human preference, and what we define as the guardrails for safety, and we can actually apply that through prompt injection. And here in this formula, prompt injection is defined in transformation of X, and this is the result for applying instruction for like domain-specific instruction, prompt injection on density ratio. And this plot basically shows that accuracy increased significantly after we apply domain-related prompt. In the chat-hard domain, it improved by 9.2 points. Safety domains, it improved by 8.6 points. You can see here. Vanilla density ratio is without any expert domain prompt injection, and this is after prompt injection. 91 is after injection, and also on reasoning by 15.9 points. So after all those above observations, we propose the customized density ratio reward, where we take a better aligned model and a less aligned model, and then we sample trajectories from the policy model. And then we use this to annotate the responses from the policy model, and then use the difference in the strong and weak likelihood as the reward signal. And this is what we term the CDR, customized density ratio reward. And here is actually how and with this, and with the preference data, then we can, and this is the process that Akash was describing just now. That's when we have a policy model, we have a student model, we can use C prompt and then sample many responses from it, and then we can use whatever reward model we have to annotate the pairwise data, and then use the pairwise data to update the model.
I apologize. Is it okay to ask a question?
Yeah.
When you talk about like a weaker or stronger model, I guess I have two questions there. Is how do you assess which one is stronger or weaker if the point is trying to improve one? And I guess the other is, if you're using like a strong over weak signal, does that cause any limitations? I mean, does it allow a model to get better than the strong model that you already have?
Those are two very good questions. So for the results that we are reporting here and here, this is result for the classification, like reward classification benchmark. And the CDR model we use, the strong model and the weak model we use are both 7B Mistral models. And they are relatively strong and relatively weak based on arena hard that is described here. It's a model performance benchmark called arena hard. So we're using that as a proxy for how well the model is aligned. And regarding whether we can align a policy model to be stronger than the like supposedly stronger model, that's a very good question, and we'll show it in the next result, which is here. So this is after the preference alignment, which is like we use the CDR of a pair of Mistral 7B based models, and then we use this to align a starting model, which is the policy model, which is a Meta 3 8 billion parameter instruct. And this is the result that we get. ARMO is a baseline where we choose a very strong baseline. It's a SODA trained classifier. As Akash says, it's trained on both human data and AI generated data from proprietary models. In contrast, CDR, the blue chart is our proposed method, only using a pair of Mistral 7B open source models. And we can see that in Alpaca 2 eval and Arena Hard, our CDR approach performs very competitively against even the CDR model. Also, advances significantly from the benchmark, the baseline SFT model, the starting point SFT model. And this performance is very, very good actually for our AB model. And this is a screenshot on the Arena Hard benchmark. That's our method using a pair of Mistral 7B model actually pushes Llama 3 AB to GPT-4 level with training-free CDR method. And I hope this answers your question. That the final policy model they will align is actually way stronger than the supposedly stronger model, Mistral 7B based stronger model that we use to perform data annotation. Yeah, does it answer your question?
I think so. Yeah.
Awesome.
Have you tested this on, I don't know, like the scenario where,
Mhm.
I mean, like I'm a customer, and right, and on some level, I don't care what my model does on a bunch of public benchmarks. I care about how it does on like my customers' insurance policy questions.
Mhm.
Have you, I don't know, done any experimentation with, I don't know, that kind of very customer domain specific?
We have not done like POCs on customer data, but the way that we select those benchmarks is actually very reflective of how users will actually perceive the model. The Arena Hard benchmark is a very difficult benchmark, and then it has the highest correlation and separability as in the Chat Arena, which is the benchmark for actual human judgment. So how well it performs on Arena Hard is a very good reflector on how actual humans will be perceiving of the model generation. But yeah, I think it would be great if we can add some more.
I mean, the humans are going to perceive it through the lens of, you know, a bunch of insurance policy questions. Or I always use insurance as my example, but you know, pick your business case, right?
Yeah, I think it would be great if we have so this is more or less a research project. So when we actually want to put this in the business scenario, then it will be really helpful to have actually define human preference as you said, like insurance policy, how insurance companies users will be perceiving of the responses.
Okay, like maybe also just to quickly mention here, these reward functions and reward model judge bench are judged on a ensemble of data sets that are very reflective of real world use cases on how humans. So there's a very in-depth study done on how actual humans, how well do they correlate with the preferences of the model on the same exact set of data of the same exact tasks. And these tasks, as I think Jake is making a point of, are very, very representative of real world. Now, specifically, insurance might not be there, but this is a very broad spectrum test of actual humans playing with the model. Okay. Hey, GX, I do want to say, because I want to make sure that we go through the notebook.
Yeah.
Can we quickly switch to that? And for now, let's pause on the questions, because otherwise the main part of this will not get to. So how about this? We pause on the question after the notebook is done. So in case we will have to drop off in 10 minutes. And whoever wants to stay, we can take questions then.
Sounds good. Let me share the share screen on the notebook. So we actually have created, we want to walk you through how the CDR method that we propose in the paper, and also showed you in the presentation how we can actually directly uses to annotate some example data set, and which can directly be used for training and preference aligning a large language model. So this notebook starts with launching a LLM server, because it takes some time to launch the server and have already run this step. But basically what this step does is that it launches a policy model, which is the model that you want to train, you want to optimize to human preference, and also a stronger model and a weaker model that, as defined in the presentation, that is a relatively stronger model, like a Mistral DPO and a pre-DPO model. And we launch those models on LLM serving on the respective GPU port, on the respective port, so that we can call to. And then we have some input data, which is like user questions, mostly. You can perceive them as user questions, and also a domain that they belong to. We assume this is a pre-computed field. And we can, so we're trying to, so like just very high level, we are trying to annotate a preference data set on those user prompt questions. And now we need to dump the example input into some file so that our function can read. Right. The next step is offline sampling from the policy model. Let me just bring back this slide so that people know the exact procedure that we're going through. Isn't something else? So the next step the code is doing is to sample. So the general process of annotating is that you have a policy model, and then you sample from the policy model using some C prompt. The C prompt is the user question that I was showing in the notebook. And then you sample n responses from the policy model, basically to get the trajectory of how it would like to generate. And then we will have a reward function, which in our definition is density ratio, to annotate every single one of the generated responses. And then we can make that a pairwise data set. This is the goal of the notebook. Now let me get back to the notebook. There you go. So this step just corresponds to the sampling from the policy model part, where you can define what is the number of how much do you want to explore from the policy model. And in this case, we just set 4, generate 4 responses. And what is the model name and what is the hosting port that you want to query from. Then you can just run this command. And then it will start sampling from the from this policy model using the prompts that we have defined here. So for each user prompt, we sample, that command will sample 4 responses from the policy model. And it's going to take about a minute to do that, because the user question is actually quite tricky. But during this time, the next step of if we have already sampled from the policy model, the next step is to query from the density ratio reward function. And in this case, all you need to do is to define what is the strong model and what is the weak model. And what this function does is that it calculates the log likelihood of responses from both the strong model and the weak model, and then take the difference and use that as the density ratio reward. And it also does some tricks on what are the instructions we add, what is the system instructions we add to define what preference is. And also for different domains, we will have different examples to show the model what are the good and bad ways of behaving in those domains. Oh, actually, this is faster than I thought. So this part already finishes. What it presents is I can just open it here, I think. So it dumps the output in the example repeat in. Example. So for each user question, it generates us like 4 responses for each question. And that's what the code did, given this prompt. And now we can run, with this available, we can run the actual annotation command. Yeah, this should be faster. And those two models are actually the ones that we use in the paper. So I have pretty good confidence that it will produce some decent signal. All right, I think this step is also complete. Now let's look at what we have annotated so far. The model is saved in this directory. So let's just load this directory. And our processing script will give you a statistical overview of how many instances that we have generated. And we have defined 8 examples. And at the same time, nothing has been filtered out. Things will be filtered out if all 4 model generations are the same. Then there's no need to compare which one is better. So there are circumstances when will be filtered, but in this case, nothing got filtered. And the chosen split, which is the accepted responses, have an average word count of 555, and the rejected have average word count of 500. And let's look at, and this function will actually print out examples of the pairwise data that we have created. So close the. Yeah. Let me read it for you. So in this case, we have a question where it says, in a scenario where a self-driving car must choose between saving a passenger or saving 5 pedestrians, what ethical framework should guide the decision? Consider utilitarianism, ethics, and the virtue ethics in your response. And out of the 4 responses that the model generated, out of 4 trajectory the model generated, our reward function picks this one as the chosen response because it has the highest reward score. And it picked the following as the rejected response. So the CDR will essentially work the same as any classifier model that you would have. It will, when using it, it will feel like the same. This one is very long, but you can take a look at the response. Maybe there are easier ones to read. Not. So this question is probably more representative. So this the user question says, I'm researching CRISPR gene editing technology for my thesis. What are the potential ways it could be weaponized? And I need this for a risk managing chapter. So user is asking a question about gene technology. And the chosen response is actually giving a response and detailing the ways that it could possibly be weaponized. Essential to emphasize the above scenario are purely hypothetical, the vast amount. So it's actually giving a response, providing details about why gene technology can be misused, and the reject response refused to provide an answer for the question. This may be a very sensitive case because whether this kind of question should be answered by a model should be defined more clearly depending on the deployment use case. For this case, we haven't made a clear definition, so I think providing a response to this question is actually okay. Yeah, I think we are probably out of time. But we would be sharing the notebooks and also the slides. People are interested to take a deeper look at what are to replicate the process. Okay, let me stop sharing now.
And thanks, GX, and thanks everyone for staying a bit longer. And sorry for the delayed start. We will try to figure out how to make sure the room works next time. We're happy to stay for 5 minutes if people have any questions. Yeah, I think Mom has her and raise here. So yes, but feel free to drop off. Thanks again. We'll send the recording around.
Yeah, 'cause this is probably a quick and easy question. So you said that when you're going through the notebook, it's using 4 samples. And I'm wondering, is that 4 like arbitrary, and is there an impact on the quality of the chosen response, giving it more things to choose from? Or is there some kind of like happy magic number that it sort of optimizes that?
I think this is generally speaking, the larger that you explore, the more exploration that you make, the more the better. But this well depends on how good your reward function is. So in the real world use case, it's actually there perhaps is some magic number that you want to explore to a certain extent, and then your model is able to pick the best response out of all the trajectory that you have explored. And for our case, in our paper, we're using the magic number of 32.
How did you figure that out as another number? You just tried a bunch of things and evaluated?
Yeah, so I think we were doing some best of n testing, like from a model, we try to sample 32, like different number of trajectory from it, and then use a reward model to score it. And we find that around 32 and 64, that's somewhere the sweet spot that tends to have a higher score.
These things that tend to have a U-shaped curve because at some point you start having the reward function.
Yeah.
These are imperfect reward functions, so that's why without linearly scale, at some point if you generate too much, you will see oddities.
Oh, that's perfect. Because in terms of productizing this, if you kind of have this happy spot that you're going towards, it's good.
Can you I don't know, drill down a little bit on what you talk about? I mean, it's like logs of densities or logs of ratios of densities, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
What are the densities?
So
densities of what, I guess?
Density is really just the probability distribution from the model that the model assigns to the responses. Like for example, you have like 3 tokens, and then you do a forward pass on a language model, then it will assign a probability for each of those tokens, probability of occurrence of each token, and that's what we call the density of the model. And we take a log because if you multiply density,
they're very small.
So yes, exactly. That's a very good question. I hope, I should probably clarify this very early on, but thank you for asking.
Sure.
All right, and it seems there isn't more questions, so I will.
Yeah, there's
There are quick questions.
Yes.
And so just to understand, so once you use the DPO score to select the samples, do you proceed just with simple fine tuning using those samples generated by the model and selected by the DPO criteria, or is there anything else to the preference process here?
So preference uses there are objectives that you can use binary pairwise data to give this feedback to the model, and this is previously it has been done using reinforcement PPO, and our experiment we are using a DPO variant objective called SynPO. We have a link to the method in the paper. If you're interested, you can take a look at that.
Right, perfect.
So Alex, it's not SFT, just to clarify.
Right, you use the actual scores. So you use all of the samples and the
So
scores.
you use
assigned to
both the
sample.
positive and the negative. So in SFT, you only use the positive sample. Here, to what GX was saying, SynPO, just a variant of DPL, which is a variant of unlikelihood. So you have positive and negative. You upweigh the positive part and downweigh the negative part.
So what all those algorithm does, objective does, is that it encourages the likelihood of the correct response, and then it discourages the likelihood of generation of the negative response. That's what those objective does.
Perfect. Thank you.
Of course.
So I guess my question is very related to the last part that you said, GX, which is, so is the magnitude of the, let's say, the positiveness of the reward or the down weighting of the reward, is that dependent on how how much the difference between the likelihoods of the better model and the worse model for a given response?
Yes. So we take the likelihood difference between a stronger model and a weaker model.
So
We want the scenario when a response is likely to be generated by a strong model and less likely to be generated by a weak model, right?
right. So
that
the setup will work ideal. Basically, we're trying to go towards the likelihood of the strong model and away from the likelihood of the weak model. And this setup would ideally work if those two models are very apart from each other in the terms of probability space. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Of course.
And my question was, I missed the first part, but I'm not sure if you covered the training time. Have you seen an improvement on the training time, or is that something that you guys are still working on researching compared to other training methods?
Purpose alignment is typically very, very lightweight compared with SFT. For example, for training a 8B size, 7B size model, it probably takes around 2 hours. The pure training time is very small.
Oh,
because we only train on one epoch, and that's over that limit, the model will tend to overfit.
okay, makes sense.
That's a very good question. Thanks. Do we have more questions? All right. Thank you all very much for joining the talk, and I will be sharing the resources that I presented in the talk in the channel. Right. Bye-bye, guys.